Welcome to Banyen Books, Branches of Wisdom, celebrating the joy of bright ideas and heartful lifelong learning. Branches of Wisdom is a series of intimate conversations with the world's most influential authors and visionaries. We explore spirituality and the human mind, ecology and culture. Most episodes are recorded with a live audience. You can join our live events and submit questions to your favorite guests. Check out our upcoming schedule at banyan.com. Since 1970, Banyen Books has been a rich oasis at the crossroads of wisdom and philosophy, offering resources for humanity's evolving paths. We're a locally owned, independent bookstore in the heart of Vancouver's Kitsilano neighborhood. Visit us in person or shop online at banyan.com. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews for the podcast. And now, enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this special event, which is a co-presentation between Word Vancouver Festival and Banyen Books and Sound. I'm your host, Ross McKeechee, and I'm the host of Branches of Wisdom, the Banyen Books video and audio podcast. We'd like to acknowledge that although we have people joining us from all over the world for these live streaming events, the physical location of Word Festival Vancouver and Banyen Books and Sound is on the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. A reminder that you can purchase the book from today's event and any other Carol Off books from Banyen Books. You can find them on our website at banyan.com. And we encourage everybody to support Word Vancouver Festival. You can go online and become a member, and you can also support Word through their silent auction and 50-50 draw. Just go to wordvancouver.ca. Word Vancouver would like to take a moment to thank our generous festival donors and sponsors. They include the Canada Arts Council, the Canada Book Fund, the Canada Heritage Fund, BC Gaming, Creative BC, the City of Vancouver, and the DBVIA. If you'd like to see a full list of our partners, you can visit Word Vancouver website. And we want to just acknowledge that without you, this free festival could not happen. If you haven't already, please consider making a donation at wordvancouver.ca. We really, really appreciate all the donors who help to support this wonderful event. We have an awesome, awesome guest today. I'm really excited to be speaking with Carol Off, who's an award-winning broadcast journalist and author who recently completed a 16-year run as co-host of the multi-award-winning CBC radio program, As It Happens. As a radio correspondent, she covered politics in Ottawa and Quebec, and as a television journalist, she reported from the Balkan Wars, the aftermath of 9/11, the elections of Vladimir Putin, and uprisings across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. She's the best-selling author of The Lion, the Fox, and the Eagle, Bitter Chocolate, The Ghosts of Medak Pocket, and All We Leave Behind, which is winner of the BC National Award for Canadian Nonfiction. She's been recognized as with a Gemini Award, 2 New York Festival Gold Medals, a Gabriel Award, a Monte Carlo Festival Award, Actors John Draney Award, and the RTDNA Lifetime Achievement Award. Today, Carol Off joins us in conversation about her #1 national bestseller, At a Loss for Words, Conversation in an Age of Rage. This is an incredible book, folks. In this urgent and incisive work, Off digs deep into 6 words whose meanings have been distorted and weaponized in recent years, and asks whether we can reclaim their value. I'm very excited to speak to her about it. Her website is caroloff.ca. And a reminder to our live audience that towards the end of the conversation, we're going to take your questions. So go ahead and type those in to the YouTube chat and we'll get to as many as we can. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome for Carol Off.
Hello.
Hi, Carol.
Hi.
Thanks so much for being here. This is so great.
Oh, my pleasure.
I know for so many of those joining from Canada, we all know and love you from As It Happens. So it's really, really exciting to have you here.
Thank you. Wait, just so you, for Americans, they, as it happens, has a very large American audience. The show was sold to NPR channels throughout the States. And I've always said some of our best Canadians are Americans.
That's great. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so this book, I just have to start by saying that I'm really actually in awe that you were brave enough to tackle what you've tackled here. It's a wide sweeping book. Um, you write in the opening, rarely has there been a more dire need than now for concerted global effort and cooperation, and yet we have become incapable of talking to each other. The language we once shared has been co-opted by extremists, and we're reduced to barking and snapping. It's not just that we dispute what path to take, we no longer agree on the meanings of the words that define our destination. So maybe I can just play devil's advocate for a moment. Why do words matter so much?
Words matter, well, because they can, first of all, are we animals or humans who communicate, we depend on society and connecting with each other. And our way of doing that is mostly through language. So language can actually inform, but can also deceive. It can putting us together and pull us apart. And why it's so important as a journalist that we have language is that I've been able to see over the years, decades that I've been covering various events, how often language is used in order to incite people to do things, to manipulate them. And what I wanted to do with this book was to make people really, really conscious of the language that was around them and how it was being used and how they might be being manipulated by those either in social media or in politics or whatever, who are trying to make money from you or to gain power through you, and to make people extremely cautious and conscious of what this language is representing and what it might be, what effect it might be having on them.
Yes. I'm curious a little bit about the conception of the book. You do mention a really beautiful book by Robert McFarlane called The Lost Words. Was that part of your inspiration for writing this book?
And he wrote this. The Lost Words was a book about. He wrote beautiful book. You should see it. It's just the illustrations are extraordinary. And what McFarlane was warning was that he'd noticed that the Oxford Junior Dictionary had been removing words about nature from this children's dictionary, so that things of like willow or otter or newt were being substituted, because you can only have so many words in a dictionary like that, and they were being replaced with words of technology like broadband or word or all the terms that people now use when they're discussing technology.
Technology.
And so what he was saying is that if you no longer have the word for something, you no longer have what it represents. You no longer, so that children losing these words no longer have the image. They no longer they can no longer know the animal or plant that has been removed from them. And so what I was alarmed with is that in the language of politics and human discourse, we were losing key vocabulary that we need in order to solve the problems we're in, that the language key words were being hijacked and weaponized and turned against us, and or used for nefarious purposes, and that we no longer owned those words when we needed them most. And it wasn't an accident. It wasn't just something that happened by chance. It was a concerted effort to steal this language from us and leave us without the very vocabulary we need in order to solve a lot of problems we're having right now.
Right. And I believe you actually conceived of and wrote this book prior to Donald Trump's second election, being elected for a second time, right?
I feel, I mean, obviously I got the Trump bump because I did not expect most of what I was saying I was going to happen or might happen. I didn't think it would come to pass. I didn't think things would get to the point where they are right now. And so I was writing the book, I thought, as a kind of cautionary tale, first of all, for our American friends I saw, if you don't look out, this is where we're headed, but also for our Canadian friends who we have to keep a close vigil on what's going on in the States in order to see if we can avoid some of the pitfalls and mistakes that have led to, I think, what we're seeing now in south of the border from us.
Yes, yeah. You talk about the language of fear. I'll just share a quote here. You said, "What we saw in Bosnia during the war, in the UK during Brexit, and in the United States during Trump's speeches is the power of demagogues to speak to people in the language of fear, uncertainty, and anger, using rhetoric to break down our trust in governments, our societies, and each other. Our only defense is language that's clear, rational, and unambiguous." I kind of have a two-part question about this, Carol. The first is, are these people tapping into fear and anger that's already there in people and manipulating it, or are they creating that anger and fear, do you think, through their words?
Well, the strongest emotions we have are those of fear and rage. And so it's easy to tap into those things because they're there, they're on the surface. We've certainly seen big technology has played that, and they made a lot of money off of creating a kind of us versus them fear of the other that is so prevalent in Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever, that they can pull you into and keep you engaged online if you are in the state of those really powerful emotions. But what I have to say, that when I realized that Donald Trump was going to win the election was during the debate with Kamala Harris, at the moment when, apropos of nothing, he wasn't related to anything, he suddenly blurted out that, that in Springfield, Ohio, they're eating people's pets. And Kamala Harris looks startled. We all kind of think, well, he's done now. You can't possibly elect someone who would say something that was patently untrue. And as all the journalists, of course, immediately descended on Springfield, Ohio in the days that followed, and could find not a single Chihuahua or Rottweiler that's been turned into a meal. But they realized it didn't matter. And J.D. Vance actually said it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's what people feel is true. And if this is not what these immigrants did, but what they do. This is what they're capable of doing. And so what he had done was something that I had studied throughout my journalism in other countries, and certainly in all my readings of how the Nazis had manipulated people in the early part in the 1930s, is that what he was doing was going subrational. He realized that, and Trump is a master at this, of appealing to people's emotions, that going for their irrational side, where you can't tell people something is true because it doesn't matter. It's what they feel is true, and that's exactly what the Nazis did. I mean, it was the most important part of their success. In fact, Hitler wrote about it in Mein Kampf. The appeal to that irrational side is so powerful, and Donald Trump was a master at that. And so we could see in that election campaign where the things he said were crazy, and of course even more so now. But it doesn't matter anymore. You've actually got people at this level of fear and anxiety in which they can't. It doesn't matter what's true. It's what you feel, and that's exactly how people get manipulated the most.
I notice there's a certain self-righteousness that comes out too in a lot of these conversations, and unwillingness to listen. Is that coming from fear? Where is this kind of arrogance coming from? When did you start seeing this?
This is really key, because it wasn't just that at some point people said it wasn't that we couldn't have conversations. We didn't want to have conversations because now the thinking is that if you give the other side some ground, if you listen to the other side, that you're giving them ground, you're letting them win, and so you can't listen to your enemies, you can't listen to the other side, because then you're being co-opted. Then they're winning, And so to actually have a conversation in which there are two sides, in which you actually debate something that has possibly two opinions or two ways of looking at it, or multiple ways of looking at it, we become incapable of doing that because we can't concede that. We can't give them ground. And that's exactly, that gets discussed a great deal within these camps, is that no, we can't talk to these people, because if we do, they'll win. And so we can't give them any ground because they're their enemy. They're not just people we disagree with, they're actually the enemy.
Yes. I'm just going to circle back to that quote. You ended that that little section saying our only defense is language that's clear, rational, and unambiguous. But that maybe is even up for grabs in some of these conversations. So, as a huge collection of hearts and minds, as a society, how do we agree on or find what is actually clear, rational, and unambiguous?
We not necessarily that we can. The point of it is to be listening very carefully for what the language is attempting to do. And so it may be that you say, well, that's not clear, or that's not rational, or I disagree with that. But listen to it. Listen to what's being said. Listen to how it's being used. And because more than anything, that's what I'm trying to get across in writing this book, is just the awareness of that. And if I could just bring it to Canadian listeners for a moment, that we now have Pierre Poilievre back in the leader of the opposition, and we're hearing his policies, and the media is covering them as his policies, what he brings to the table. But if you listen to them, it's not policy, it's ideology, and you should listen very, very, very closely to what Pierre Poilievre says, because he talks about, for instance, that he will defund any museums or universities that have woke radicals on them or woke ideology, without ever defining what that means. He said he will have monitors on university campuses who will inspect things for free speech, and to ensure there's free speech on campus. And he will defund universities that are found to be in default of that, according to what their definition will be of free speech. He's talked about getting rid of the CBC, because apparently we no longer need the CBC because we have Facebook. He said you get all your news that you need from your phone. And so when you listen to these things, is that, okay, well, it's been covered as being, well, those are his ideas, that's his platform, that's what he's selling. But it's ideology. And so listen to the ideology, understand where it's coming from and what he's selling. And if you agree with that, if you like what you're actually hearing, then fine, go for it. But if you feel that is leading us down, that ideology is similar to what perhaps we're watching in the United States or even in Europe, then you might start to listen more carefully to what Pierre Poilievre is actually saying.
Right. I think you had a passage to share about the way that the Third Reich used certain languaging. It seems like it might be something that would help clarify what you're talking about. A great example.
Well, this is part of, came out of this guy, Victor Klemperer, who was a university professor in Dresden in the 20s and 30s, a Jew. And he started to notice that there was this really scary tendency starting at about 1930, 31, to start changing the language and to making these appeals to the mobilization of emotion, as he called it. And so I'll just read this bit about what. So I began to investigate how exactly Hitler and the Nazis used language and how they manipulate people. I'll just read this one page. When called to account for his crimes, Hitler's chief architect, Albert Speer, told the Nuremberg tribunal that what distinguished the Third Reich from all previous dictatorships was its use of all the means of communication to sustain itself and to deprive its objects of the power of independent thought. This goes to the heart of what's dangerous about our present political predicament. It's not that we have differences of opinion, it's that emotion is trumping logic and reason. People are persuaded to believe that a strong man is the solution. No one needs to think for themselves. Our inability to talk to each other isn't an accident. It's the objective of those who can only get what they want if they turn us into adversaries. It's a crucial first step in a transition toward anti-democratic and illiberal governments. Turning us against each other creates opportunities for demagoguery. Populism does not have an ideology, though it does speak a language. It offers simple solutions to complex problems. It employs the demagogues' vernacular of us versus them, establishing that the people, the good guys, are oppressed by the bad guys, the corrupt elite. But key to its success, especially for Donald Trump, is demonizing the other. Corrupt elites are bad enough, goes the pitch, but the true evil is that elites are giving money, jobs, status, and rights to undeserved others, immigrants, women, LGBTQ plus folks, Black people, Muslims. The radical right's populist campaign succeeds by identifying an enemy who is displacing the real people, stealing their position in society, destroying their traditions. Populists promise that they will make you feel better. But more important, they offer to make your enemies feel worse. Populism is to politics what kitsch is to art. It's sentimental, self-indulgent. It manipulates people through their emotions. It is meant to generate feelings, not ideas, and it's dangerous.
Wow. Thank you. Now, you selected 6 words. Each chapter is a word that you've honed in on: freedom, democracy, truth, woke, choice, and taxes. What kind of process did you go through to come to decide upon these words?
Well, some timing context fits into this because I began to write this book or conceive of this book during the so-called Freedom Convoy in Canada. Excuse me. And also inspired by what I'd seen already in the January 6th insurrection in Washington, which was this idea that these words, freedom and democracy, were being used in ways that did not resemble what these were not your grandmother's words anymore. And that freedom, for the Freedom Convoy, was the freedom to do what you want, the freedom to be liberated from having to wear a mask or to get vaccinated or to take care of other people, the freedom to be liberated from government and government control and regulations and whatever. And so this idea of freedom was not the freedom that I knew freedom to be, which is to be free from tyranny, to be free from want, to be free from need, to be free from oppression. The people died in enormous numbers to defend ideas of freedom as I had known it. And this was a different version of freedom. So I wanted to write about how that word had been hijacked. And then democracy was at that point beginning to, and now hugely in the United States, being discredited as a political ideology or a political organization, that this is a doctrine that had outlived its usefulness, that it allowed too many of the wrong people to have access to the means of getting ahead or the means of production. And so we needed to destroy these institutions, these pillars of democracy, in order to be able to safeguard a core group that was identified and is now clearly identified as white Christians in the United States and then elsewhere, because it's also these ideas, you'll find them in India, or you'll find them in Hungary or whatever, but they're defining this very, very narrow group. And that democracy is something that gets in the way of these ideas that because democracy says that we're supposed to have rule of law, we're supposed to be inclusive, that all people within the democracy should have the same rights and equal opportunities to realize who they are and to advance if they can. But these were ideas that are now being discredited. And when I was writing the book, I really didn't think we'd get this far, but now clearly, and I wrote a great deal about Project 2025, which was a kind of blueprint for what we're seeing now. And it's 900 pages of frightening material, which has actually which I just said, hey, pay attention, look at this thing if you can, which I was writing before even the election of Donald Trump. And now we're seeing it actually in play. And so I chose these words at a time. The word woke was very important because woke is actually a very beautiful word. It came from the, Black Lives Matter, politicized it, but it had already existed for some time as a kind of language, a vernacular of Black people in the United States who would warn each other to say, be woke, be careful, watch out, be very careful what's going on, what enemies are there, what threats exist. And it evolved from there into something else. But it doesn't matter what woke means to those who invented it. Woke was hijacked by the right, who said that this woke thing was actually very dangerous. This woke was a way for people that shouldn't be in institutions, shouldn't have jobs, shouldn't have positions of authority, for them to get in, because this kind of was a Marxist idea or a radical idea or a subversive thing. And so, but it no longer mattered what woke actually meant. Woke just became this catch-all, this way to smuggle odious ideas into the public space under calling them, this is wokeism. And the least it was defined, the better for those who were using it, who needed it to represent, to be able to actually say racist, xenophobic, homophobic things without actually saying those things. It's exactly, the Nazis did the same thing. They developed a whole vocabulary that allowed them to say things before it became perfectly okay to say the worst possible things about Jews or minorities, and actually to start killing them in large numbers.
Wow. Yeah. I on the word freedom, I wanted to quote something you said, and you touched on it a little bit here. You point out hypocrisy. So you use the examples of the storming of the Capitol in Washington, D.C. versus the reaction of government to Black Lives Matters presenters, or in Canada with the Idle No More movement versus the reaction to the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa. So you write, the reason for such a difference in reaction can only be that the rights and freedoms that we believe are a necessary part of democracy do not only apply, and indeed have always only applied, to a select group. So you're pointing out the inequities in our society when it comes to truly marginalized groups versus these groups that perceive themselves as being marginalized. I'm just wondering if you can expand on that point a little bit, because I think it's really important.
You know, this that passage, thank you for that. It speaks to a larger idea that I try to get across in this book, and that's that the right doesn't has no monopoly on racism, has no monopoly on treating people badly. This is, you know, that there are so many ways in which we do not have inclusive societies that offer equal opportunities to all, and there are a lot of people on the left, and liberals, progressives, who fail to see that we don't have that they're perfectly happy having democracy as long as it doesn't impinge upon their special status. And so, what I was hoping, when people say, you know, what do you hope comes? How do you hope things turn out? And I said, I don't want to go back to the way things were. I don't want us to wake up tomorrow and find out that all this was a bad dream and that we're all back to where we were, because we can't and should not go back to where we were. We have to start really developing a society that includes everybody in it, that gives equal opportunities to all of its citizens, and in fact, even not its citizens, those who have rights that we have universal international laws in order to protect. And so that's when we try to find out who should matter in these scenarios, we have to see that there are many forces, both on the left and the right, that have been denying a lot of people a place in the sun, an ability to be to be included in the project. And if whatever comes of this, and I think we're in for a really rough ride. Well, I don't think, everyone knows we're in for a really rough ride. We're in it now. especially in the United States, is at some point, I do believe we will emerge at the other side. And when we do, we have to think we can't just go back to the way things were. We have to really look forward and find a different kind of leadership and a different kind of opportunity for for all people to be part of this democracy and this idea of freedom.
Right. That reminds me, because at the end of the chapter on democracy, right, as with freedom, the word democracy can only be restored and respected if most people can see themselves within it, benefiting from and sharing in its common humanity. That's not a liberal or conservative domain, but a social one. And if you have no opportunity to be equal within a democracy, why would you go to the ramparts to save it? Is there some key things that you think are missing? Like you do really support the liberal democracy that we have now, and it's a very important foundation. But you're also saying there are these key things that are still missing from our democracies.
Mhm.
How can we make our democracy more inclusive?
Leadership. I think people both in the left and the right. I think what's happened is that we have a really strong far left and a strong far right. And I don't know how many people they represent, maybe more on the right in the United States than in Canada, maybe more on the left in here. But I think that the vast majority of people are in between. I'd say about 75% of people are actually in between those two poles, who don't feel they have a political home anymore, that don't feel that there's anything that really represents them. I have to believe that that there is a large number of Americans who are really unhappy with what is going on right now in the States. And I have to believe there are a large number of liberals in this country who do not want to allow for extremism in their camp either. I think that what we're looking for is leadership. We're looking for politicians who have the courage to put their heads up above the rampart and to take a long look at where we're going, and to start making clear decisions about what would be of benefit to most people. But I think that we don't feel that, and so I think happily we're now in having more community-based understandings and little programs and groupings are emerging on a very grassroots level. Like, people keep sending me notices about really interesting things that people are doing in order to have that conversation and to sort of bridge these divides. But I'm not seeing that on the big stage. Maybe Mark Carney will come to represent that in Canada. Maybe there are politicians we're yet to see in the United States that will come to represent that. But I just don't see that leadership that is taking that middle of the population, those people who want a political home, who want to live in a democracy, who want to see that people are free from need and fear, who want to live in peace, who want all those things, that core of people need to feel they're represented. And I just don't think they are right now.
Yeah. Yeah. In the chapter on truth, you talk about journalists, and you say we can no longer cover events without being accused of being part of a conspiracy to suppress the quote unquote real truth. And then you say truth is the foundation of our trust. It's no accident that destroying it is job one for those who seek an end to liberal democracy. I'm just curious if you can expand a little more on the experience of being a journalist during these challenging times.
Yeah, well, it was a shock to us, I think, in 2017 when we first heard this expression, alternate facts. And that even though we were reporting what we could see, what we saw, what we knew, that in the United States, there was this pronouncement, well, you have your facts, we have ours. And which was actually a concept that actually comes from academic world, from deep into philosophy and etymology, but was brought to the surface with this idea, with a vengeance, and declared as being, well, your truth is not my truth, my facts are not your facts. And it suddenly, it was one of the funny things is that the people started talking about this as being Orwellian. This was like something out of 1984 that we were beginning. And sales of 1984 jumped 75,000% in the weeks after Donald Trump was first became the president, and when we started hearing this kind of language, because 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4, up is not, up is down, in is out. It just, we were lost in it, and that just, once we were back on our back heels, and as a business, as a school of thought, journalists tend to want to show both sides of everything. We're trained in order to say, well, this is side and the other side, and we had no idea what to do. We were stuck, and so it really became extremely difficult to report. And then the added part of it was that we became the enemy, and that was, these people are lying to you. This is the reason why you think this, the reason why you're getting it wrong, because these people are part of a conspiracy. They're actually part. They're deceiving you deliberately. They're making money from you. They're laughing at you because they're actually telling you things that aren't true, and you're buying it. So the idea of breaking down trust is really, really key to how this kind of extreme populism works. And this is something that Hannah Arendt, the great philosopher, had warned about in her book, The Origins of Totalitarianism, that once people can no longer tell the difference between what's right and what's wrong, that with such people you can do anything. She wrote. She said that this is exactly how it begins. When you do not, when they've taken away your ability or to figure out what is up and what's down, what's true and what's false, then you can manipulate these people in any way, and that's what we were faced with. And to try and report in that environment, to actually try and say what's true, at a time when we were also losing resources, because it was just the journalism was losing a lot of money, from whether it was in public broadcasting or in private media. It became extremely challenging to try and tell the story. So we resorted to these sort of these fact checks, and which is great. I mean, you should do fact checking, which is like, this is how many times Donald Trump lied today, and it would list all the lies. But it didn't matter, because of, what I was saying earlier, that the truth no longer mattered. It wasn't what actually happened. It's what things that happen. It's not what people might have done. It's what they will do. And so when you're able to say that whatever else you can, I may not have any immigrants who have committed all these crimes, but we know this is what they do, because they're illegal aliens who are going to slit your throat in your house if you don't look out. And so it doesn't matter what we say, well, prove it, show us the pets who've been eaten in Springfield, Ohio, sort of thing. It doesn't matter, because we're not talking about what's true. It doesn't matter anymore what's true. And when you no longer have truth, when you no longer agree on what the facts are, then you no longer have truth. And if you no longer have truth, you no longer have trust. And if you no longer have trust, you have lost the foundation of civil society.
Wow. I just want to remind our live audience, we're going to be getting to some of your questions for Carol in about 5 or 10 minutes here. So please keep them coming in the YouTube chat there, and we're looking forward to hearing some of those. The final chapter of the book, the 6th word, Carol, is taxes. And I think it's maybe a bit surprising. And you said, this last word may appear to be an odd addition to my list. Has anyone ever gone to the ramparts to defend their right to pay taxes? And yet it's the most important word. Why? Why is it the most important word?
This book is in many ways personal. I tell a lot of personal stories. I talk about my own experiences of family and friends, and that I grew up in a not a very political household, but I grew up in a society that in a community and in a house where we were taught the ideas of social justice and the importance of being good citizens, and that my father actually worked for the tax department. He was a special investigator, and what I learned from him was that taxes are the foundation of society. If we don't pay taxes, then we can't possibly do the kinds of programs we want to have, and have the kind of equality that we want to have in our society. So so taxes is, I think, the most important chapter. And I think it's also the follow the money chapter, where I show how this idea of denigrating taxation and getting people to say, well, I don't want to pay taxes anymore. This money is being stolen from them, is actually a part of a conspiracy of people who are trying to amass as much money as they can, and to have as little go to people that they don't regard as being deserving of that money. So do you want me to, we talked about, I don't know if there's enough time, but there's a little story that I
Yeah,
had.
no, I think there's time. I'd love that. Yeah,
Okay.
Carol's gonna read a passage from the 6th chapter here, a true life story.
As I was saying, that I tell a lot of personal anecdotes. So this is one of them, and this is happened in Toronto one evening. At the dinner party were about a dozen very wealthy Torontonians, brought together on a warm spring evening at the home of a generous patron. Gatherings such as this one, intended to solicit big donations for a worthy cause, are not unusual, but it was out of the ordinary to have a journalist in attendance. The friend who'd asked me to come had instructed me that I was to be on my best behavior. She was the director of an NGO, recipient of the evening's proceedings, and she needed these well-heeled guests to pay her bills. At the end of the multi-course meal served in the atrium of a grand house, there would be a few speeches, and then those with money, who did not include me, would take out their pens and write checks for my friends' organizations. I did keep my mouth mostly shut during dinner, which wasn't so hard since there was little that I could contribute to their conversation. Everyone at my end of the table knew each other, and having all just returned from winters abroad, they were anxious to catch up. None of them had gone to Florida as snowbirds. Their usual pattern was to spend fall in London or Paris, then move on to the south of France during the colder months. Their lively talk turned to the topic of whether it was best to own or rent in the European cities to which they installed themselves during the winter. The consensus was that they should purchase a pied-à-terre, but then decamp to suitable digs in the Côte d'Azur in the colder months. The conversation was not all autumn strolls in Hyde Park or moules frites in Nice. There was a dark side. The man next to me shared news of a friend who'd had a bad time in his tax haven abode in the Caribbean over that winter. As best as I can recall the story, the couple had arrived home late one night and tripped their own security system. They watched in horror as their tropical estate shut down, steel gates and all, with them on the outside. Given that no one pays taxes where they live, which is the reason why they live there, the couple had no authorities to turn to who might have helped them, or family and neighbors who could take them in. After a beat of reflective silence, someone at the dinner said what I presumed they were all thinking: it's getting so difficult to find a place to invest. This launched a lively discussion about the latest federal government attempts to plug tax loopholes and the dreaded new efforts on the part of the Canada Revenue Agency to chase down tax evaders. The wine was excellent, and I was enjoying it far too much. My friend shot me a warning glance, suspecting that I was about to get involved. When you went to the bathroom this morning, I said, where did your turd go after you flushed? The whole room went silent, tools down, darts shooting from my friend's eyes. I answered my own question. Well, it went down a long pipe and then underground, and it swam a great distance all the way down to the sewage treatment plant at Lake Ontario. I was on a roll. And then what happened? I asked on behalf of no one. Well, it and the water got all cleaned up, and then that water was recycled and came back to your house. And tomorrow morning, you will make coffee with it. I'm not sure this is what really happens, but I was going for shock value. As they glared, I drove my point home. How is this transformation possible? It's because of our taxes. Our taxes make that magic happen. Isn't that amazing? It turned out that no one was amazed or amused. Chairs scraped against the floor and dinner was over. If I had delivered an actual turd into the room, the departure could not have been more abrupt. But what did they really find obscene? I suspect it was not the word turd, but the other one starting with T. The man who had been seated next to me lingered long enough to confirm that. I understand the point you're trying to make, he said. And for the record, I have no problem with paying to have my turd taken away. I just do not want to pay for anyone else's.
Brilliant. I just love that. I love that. Thank you. And that's the key point there, is that people are happy to pay for their own well-being, but they're not seeing the value in contributing to everyone's well-being, and that we need that collective support to ensure the safety, survival, and thriving of our society, right?
In fact, they feel they're being ripped off. It's so that the essence of this is that you're willing to pay for some kind of bespoke turd removal, which would cost enormous amounts of money every day, just in order to make sure that nobody else would benefit from a system where you'd pay a few cents to have your turd removed collectively. You don't want to do that because you've made that money and it's yours. And so that's a Canadian audience, and I think I don't think that's unusual among. We're right now in Canada. We have the largest separation of rich and poor in our history. It's growing at the fastest rate it has ever grown. In the United States, you have people clamoring to be the first trillionaire in a country where there are children who can't get treatment for diseases that are curable. I mean, these things are obscene. This is an obscene separation of rich and poor that we haven't seen on any scale. I mean, you could go back in history and find it, I guess, but this is really very, very dangerous as well. I mean, in fact, Stephen Poloz, the former Bank of Canada governor, said to me in the conversation, he said we're toast. If we allow this separation, if we allow these differences to grow at the rate that it's growing, he said, we can't, as a society, sustain it. And so it's not just for your own refusal to pay to have your turd taken away. It's for your own safety. Because, as people keep pointing out, the pitchforks will come out eventually. And you can live in your ivory tower, you can have your escape in the Caribbean, but eventually people will turn against you for not allowing them to have the basic means of survival.
Well, I wish we could. I mean, there's so much to cover here. There's so much nuance. There's so many elements. I wish we could talk for a much longer, but we do also have some nice audience questions coming in. Is it okay if we get to some of those?
Yeah, please, yes.
Okay, the first one is from Merman, who says, "Thank you for making explicit what generates such discomfort as I listen to Pierre Poilievre and others presenting ideology versus policy. Beyond listening carefully, what more can we do in face of this?"
I think we have to challenge the media. And I think that I'm really alarmed at how a lot of this stuff is being reported as being point of view. We haven't talked about what's just happened in recent days with the murder of Charlie Kirk. But it's being covered. People are attempting to cover it as though there are two sides to what he had to say. Not two sides to the murder. Of course, it's abhorrent. It's terrible. But but we should maybe say, what was he really about? And some of the things he said were really, really shocking and disturbing and designed to stir people up. And he never shied away from it. I don't know why we should. But I think that's the danger is if we allow the media to sort of whitewash a lot of this stuff. And so I think challenging the media need to be far more challenged. I mean, write letters, make phone calls, ask questions, push back, because these things, you can have a difference. You have more power as a citizen than you do as a consumer. We're now trying to boycott the United States with our purchase power. You have far more power as a citizen than you do with your purchase power, and so yeah, boycott all you want, but speak up, show up, vote, go to things, challenge, ask questions, not in a confrontational way, but to say that you're wrong and I'm right, but just ask the question, what do you really mean by that, Mr. Poilievre, Mr. Carney? Where are you really going with that? Find those opportunities to challenge your local politician or on the bigger stage, but just don't let people just listen to what they're saying, and in a firm but polite way, challenge what they're saying as to what's really behind these sentiments.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that question. We have another one here from Sabina that says, such a very timely and important book. Atwood's recent tango with book banners in Edmonton contributed another alert for Canadians. How can we protect, quote unquote, clearly written books here at home?
This actually echoes back to the previous question, because what I love about what Margaret Atwood did was that, I mean, that whole policy crumbled in it seemed like minutes as soon as she started to make fun of it. And her use of humor, which is really dry and can be extremely cutting, she went after them. She fearlessly went after them, and she always does this. And you can say, well, she's Margaret Atwood, she can do that. But it takes courage to challenge these things, and to call them out for what they are. And so you saw how quickly Danielle Smith in Alberta went from saying, well, no, we never said to do that. These people are just, I forget the phrase, someone will know what it is. They sort of, you're just using this maliciously against us, because Edmonton's school board was just trying to make trouble. It's like, well, you don't make these policies, you don't put this stuff out, and then expect everyone's just going to be quiet. And that's the important thing. Be noisy in a very sort of direct, informed, and firm way. I mean, not to make trouble for trouble's sake, but to challenge these things. And I think the way Atwood showed how it's done, she of course got international attention and humiliated the Alberta government. But we can do this in small ways too. You can make fun of these things pretty easily.
Thanks, and thanks, Sabina, for that question. There's one here from Brianna who said, do you think there's a danger in over-policing language and shutting down debate?
Oh, absolutely, completely. I mean, I'm president of Canadian Journalists for Free Expression, and so I often find myself having to hold my nose and defend someone's right to say something. And so I absolutely that there are limits. I think hate speech, and even that's really difficult to define. But I think that the cancel culture was not helpful. I think it raised some questions about how language is used and how people are sort of characterized in. But whatever the left did with cancel culture, the cancel culture never had political and legal power. It could make havoc of some people's lives, and some people actually did better because of cancel culture. But on the other side, those who are shutting down the language and speech on the right have access to the tools of power. They're using the school boards, they're using laws, they're using power in order to do that in a way that the left doesn't. Not to say the left, if they had power, the hard left or extreme left wouldn't do the same thing. But so both sides need to be held at bay, that neither should be able to shut down the language of serious debate. But to call, let's say, what people are saying now, that Charlie Kirk was simply having conversations on campuses, well, put that to the countless professors and teachers who were put on his hit list, who he called them the kind enemies of the truth and education. and the horrible things that happened to them. I mean, both sides pulled off this cancel culture thing, but one side I think had far more ability to damage than the other. But in both cases, it's wrong.
Yeah. There's a question from Stan who says, is real cross-party impact even possible anymore, or have polarization and spin made it impossible?
I think that we're so preoccupied with what's going on in the United States that we have lost sight of our own country and where we are in our own at this point in history and time. And it's like we're driving along and there's a massive car accident that's just happened on the side of the road. It's just, there are like smashed cars, bodies everywhere, emergency vehicles, and we're just completely preoccupied with watching. Whoa, geez, that's crazy. And so I'm thinking we have to stop watching this car accident and this massive pileup on the side of the road here that's the United States, and put our eyes back on the road, our own road, and see where we're going as a country, and to see where we are, and to be more conscious of where we are as a country and as a culture and society. And I think if you do that, you find that we're not as polarized as the United States. There is still a lot of possibility for conversation. There is still a greater will to have that. I think it's diminishing quickly because I think social media is evil. I think it's poison, and it makes its money off of polarization. It makes its money off of us raging at each other and being adversarial. It keeps us engaged, and the longer we're engaged, the more money they make. That's a really, really ugly system, ugly technology and business. And so but I think there's still tremendous possibilities for us to find common ground. I don't think Pierre Poilievre wants to find that common ground, but I have lots of family members who are conservatives, who are looking for a political home in federal politics, that don't find that with the present Conservative Party, or the leader at least. And I think there are a lot of people who are conservatives and liberals who really see things who want the same thing for their society. And I think if we stop being so preoccupied with that car accident and start thinking more about where we're going, we might start finding that the person next to us in the car is someone we could have a conversation with, and maybe make some progress,
Yeah. Finding ways to bridge the perceived gaps and really see each other and listen to each other. I have one more question for you, Carol, and I want to thank our audience for all of your great questions. Before I get to that, I just want to acknowledge that all the staff and volunteers at Word Festival Vancouver, and the Banyan staff, our events manager and curator, Jacob Steele, and letting people know there are many more Word Vancouver events happening. So you can check out all the listings at wordvancouver.ca. And please don't forget to help keep the festival free by donating and bidding at the silent auction, or you can also buy a 50-50 draw ticket. Go to wordvancouver.ca. And also don't forget to get your copy of Carol's book. Honestly, you guys, this is an amazing book, very important. At a Loss for Words, Conversation in an Age of Rage. You can get it at banyan.com, or if you're somewhere else in the world and you don't want to shop online, find an independent bookstore. Support your independent bookstores. Carol, thanks so much for being here. It's been great to speak with you. And I'm just wondering, you've been working as a journalist for so many years. What's next for you? Do you have anything on the horizon that you want to tell us about?
As soon as I get off this this session, I go back into my work here, which is I'm writing another book. And this book is, going back to my car crash analogy, this one's focused on Canada, and it's about patriotism. It's about the Canadian patriotism, and it's a personal book, even more personal than the previous one, which I review all the times in my lifetime when I saw us close to the edge as we are now, where we're being threatened. Our sovereignty is being threatened mostly by the United States. And what we found as a society, what we found in our hearts and minds that allowed us to keep this country together. And so it's a kind of examination of my patriotism and the patriotism I have been observing in this country for many, many decades.
Wonderful. That sounds great. Looking forward to seeing that. And thank you again so much, Carol, for joining us today and for your continued work and your bravery in taking on topics like this.
You keep saying that, Ross. Now I'm getting nervous.
Well, I just kind of, I would be scared to get out there and speak about this stuff myself. It's so polarized right now.
I just very quickly at the end, the reaction I've had in Canada has been terrific. People are just so eager to have these conversations, and I like having them with them.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ross.
Thanks for joining us for Branches of Wisdom, a podcast of Banyen Books and Sound, Canada's spiritual and healing resource since 1970. Our podcast producer is Jacob Steele, and I'm your host, Ross McKeechee. Watch all our conversations on YouTube by searching for Banyen Books, or listen on your favorite podcast platform. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews and comments. We love to hear from you. For all our live events, books, and more, visit us at banyan.com.